Hello everyone, welcome to my channel Bold and Beautiful today. The pressure in Will Spencer's living room was so thick it felt like the walls themselves were hearkening. Sun poured in through the bottom-to-ceiling windows, but it did nothing to warm the icy standoff unfolding between Will and Electra. She stood near the settee, arms crossed tightly over her casket, jaw gripped in a way that told him she'd formally prepared herself for disappointment, yet still hoped, against all sense, that he'd choose her. Will, meanwhile, stood by the fireplace, hands shoved deep into his pockets, eyes fixed on the bottom. He'd rehearsed this discussion in his head a dozen times, but now that the moment had arrived, every word felt heavier than he anticipated. Electra had made her offer calmly, rationally, nearly kindly. She'd suggested that Dylan move out, that he find another place to stay so Will and Electra could eventually move forward without the constant shadow of the once brewing over them. On paper, it made sense. In real life, it felt like treason. Electra broke the silence first. "I'm not asking you to abandon him, Will," she said vocally, however there was an unmistakable edge to her voice. "I'm asking you to choose us. Dylan can stay nearly differently. He has options. We earn a fresh launch." Will eventually looked up, and the pain in his eyes made Electra's breath hitch. This wasn't the look of a man torn between convenience and comfort. This was the look of someone standing at the edge of a decision that would change everything. "I can't do that," Will said still. Electra strengthened. "You can't," she repeated, unbelief creeping in. "I won't," he corrected gently. "Dylan stays." The words hit like a poke. Electra took a step back, as if she physically demanded distance from what she'd just heard. "You're choosing him," she said, her voice rising. "Over me." Will shook his head incontinently. "No. I'm choosing what's right." Electra let out a bitter laugh. Funny how what's right always seems to involve Dylan. That name, Dylan, hung in the air like a loaded armament. Dylan, who had shown up months ago with nowhere differently to go. Dylan, who carried secrets, guilt, and injuries no bone differently could see. Dylan, who Will had promised to cover when the rest of the world turned its reverse on him. What Electra didn't completely understand, what Will had no way truly put into words, was that Dylan wasn't just a guest in his home. He was family, perhaps not by blood, but by participated history, by late-night admissions, by miscalculations that had nearly destroyed them both. "I made him a pledge," Will said, his voice establishment now. "When Dylan walked through that door, he was broken. He still is. I'm not remonstrating him out because it's inconvenient." Electra's eyes lusted with unshed gashes. "And what about the pledges you made to me?" That question cut deeper than Will wanted to admit. Across city, Dylan stood in the guest room, gaping at his reflection in the glass, ignorant that his entire future was being battered just a many long halls down. He'd tasted the pressure between Will and Electra growing for weeks now. The hushed exchanges, the forced grins, the way Electra's eyes hardened whenever she saw Dylan's jacket draped over the president or his coffee mug in the Gomorrah. He abominated being the reason for their conflict. Dylan pressed his triumphs against the dresser, recollections submerging back, how he'd lost everything, how Will had been the only one who answered his call that night. No judgment. No questions. Just a simple, "Come home." That word had meant everything. Back at the house, Electra wiped a gash from her impertinence, wrathfulness snappily replacing vulnerability. "You're asking me to live in a house where I'll always come second," she said. "I'll no way contend with Dylan for your fidelity, Will." "You're not contending," Will claimed. "This isn't a competition." "Also, why does it feel like I'm losing?" she shot back. The verity was brutal. Will didn't know how to assure her without lying. Because deep down, he knew Dylan demanded him right now in a way Electra didn't, or couldn't, understand. Electra seized her bag, her movements sharp and decisive. "I hoped you'd surprise me," she said coldly. "I hoped you'd eventually choose a future rather of adhering to the history." Will followed her to the door. "Electra, please." She turned, eyes blazing. "Call me when Dylan moves out," she said. "Until also, do'n't." And just like that, she was gone. The door slammed with a futurity that echoed through the empty house. Will stood there for a long moment, heart pounding, wondering if he'd just lost the woman he loved ever. Latterly that evening, Dylan came downward. Having tasted commodity was wrong the moment he heard the frontal door before. He sat up while sitting on the settee, gaping blankly at the darkened TV. She left, didn't she? Dylan asked still. Will jounced, not trusting himself to speak. Dylan's casket tensed with guilt. This is because of me. Will eventually looked at him, shaking his head. No. This is because I refused to turn my reverse on someone who needs me. Dylan swallowed hard. I know I wanted this. I'll leave. I'll figure commodity out. No, Will said incontinently, standing up. You're not going anywhere. Dylan goggled at him, stupefied. Will. I meant what I said, Will continued. You stay. As long as you need. The gratefulness in Dylan's eyes was unmistakable, but so was the conflict. You shouldn't have to immolate your relationship for me. Will soughed. Perhaps Electra and I weren't as solid as I allowed. That wasn't entirely true, and they both knew it. The coming day, the fallout gurgled through Los Angeles like campfire. At Forrester Creations, Electra commended in a stupefied Katie, her voice pulsing as she reported Will's turn down. He didn't indeed vacillate, Electra said plaintively. Dylan matters more. Katie lowered courteously. Or perhaps Will feels responsible for him. That doesn't make it easier, Electra snapped. Meanwhile, rumors spread presto, some saying Dylan had dirt on Will, others claiming there was commodity darker binding them together. Ridge raised an eyebrow when he heard, Brooke grew concerned, and suddenly everyone had an opinion about a decision that only Will truly understood. When Electra eventually brazened Dylan days latterly, the hassle was explosive. I know I asked for your charity, Dylan said defensively when she indicted him of ruining her relationship. And I know I asked you to move into my swain's house. Electra fired back. They stood elevation piecemeal, pressure crackling however. She continued, you'll leave, if you watch about Will at all. Dylan's voice dropped however. You'll stop asking him to choose, if you watch about him. That silenced her. Because deep down, she knew Dylan was right. Still, the damage had been done. Will's house, formerly full of horse laugh and stopgap, now felt disunited, one half enthralled by fidelity and guilt, the other visited by the absence of the woman he loved. Every night, Will lay awake wondering if there was another way, if he'd missed a concession that could have saved everything. But one thing was clear: Will Spencer had made his choice. He chose to stand by Dylan. And in true bold and the beautiful fashion, that choice was only the morning of the drama. Because Electra wasn't done fighting. Dylan wasn't done hiding his secrets. And Will? He was about to learn that doing what feels right can still bring you everything. The silence in Will's house had come unsupportable. Days passed, yet Electra's absence dallied in every corner. Her forgotten scarf draped over the president, her favorite mug still sitting in the cupboard, untouched. Will noticed everything. He always had. And every memorial twisted the cutter deeper. Dylan tried to stay out of the way, spending further time in the guest room, leaving beforehand in the morning and returning late at night. But no matter how careful he was, the pressure between them was insolvable to ignore. You do'n't have to slide around me, Will eventually said one evening, breaking the quiet as Dylan floated near the kitchen doorway. Dylan dithered. I kind of do. Will rubbed his face, frustration etched into every line. Electra made her choice. That's not on you. Dylan's jaw tensed. You keep saying that, but I saw the way she looked at me. Like I stole commodity that belonged to her. Connections do'n't belong to anyone, Will snapped, also incontinently softened. Sorry. I didn't mean. It's forfeiture, Dylan said. You're hurting. They both were. Across city, Electra sat in Katie's living room, wine glass gripped tightly in her hand. She'd replayed that moment with Will over and over, the certainty in his voice, the way he didn't indeed break ahead refusing her offer. That was what hurt the most. I feel stupid, Electra admitted still. I allowed. I signified more. Katie watched her precisely. Perhaps you do. Just not in the way you need right now. Electra laughed plaintively. That's not assuring. Katie soughed. Electra, Will's always been a fixer. He attracts broken people because he believes it's his job to save them. And what does that make me? Electra shot back. Collateral damage. Katie didn't answer, and that silence spoke volumes. Meanwhile, at Forrester Creations, whispers about Dylan were growing louder. Ridge had heard enough to grow suspicious. Why is Will so invested in this Joe? Ridge asked Brooke, lowering his voice. People do'n't blow up their connections for house guests. Brooke lowered. You suppose there's further to it? I know there is. That dubitation would soon prove justified. One night, long after Will had gone to bed, Dylan sat alone on the reverse yard, gaping into the darkness. His phone buzzed in his hand, an unknown number. He knew who it was before he indeed opened the communication. We need to talk. You see, ain't keep hiding. Dylan's heart pounded. He compartmented back sluggishly. Stay down from me. The reply came incontinently. Tell Will the verity, or I will. Dylan slammed the phone down, fear submerging his casket. This was why he no way wanted to stay long. Why he no way let himself believe safety could last. Inside the house, Will stirred, seeing commodity was wrong. The coming morning, Electra made a decision she'd been avoiding. She showed up at Will's house. When Will opened the door and saw her standing there, feelings crashed over him. Relief, craving, and heartache all at formally. Electra, he breathed. I'm not then to supplicate, she said snappily. I'm then for answers. Dylan set when he heard her voice. Electra stepped outside, her eyes incontinently landing on Dylan. We need to clear the air. All of it. Will looked between them. Perhaps this isn't the stylish. No, Electra intruded. It's overdue. She turned to Dylan. Why does Will feel so responsible for you? And do'n't say fellowship. I'm done accepting half-trueness. Dylan swallowed hard. This was the moment he'd been dreading. Because I ruined his life formally, Dylan said still. Will strengthened. Dylan. No, Dylan continued. She deserves to know. Electra's breath caught. What did you do? Dylan's voice shook. Time's agone. I made a mistake. A big bone. I covered up commodity illegal, commodity that should have destroyed Will's family. Will's face went pale. Stop. But Dylan couldn't. I took the fall. I faded. And Will no way stopped condemning himself for letting me do it. Electra goggled at Will, stunned. Is that true? Will looked down. That's why you won't let him leave, Electra rumored. You're still trying to pay a debt. Will's silence verified everything. Electra stepped back, overwhelmed. So I wasn't crazy. This wasn't about fidelity, it was about guilt. It's further than that, Will said, eventually meeting her eyes. He saved me too. By destroying himself. Electra asked. Dylan jounced sluggishly. Enough much. The room felt heavy with verity. Electra's wrathfulness softened but not into remission. You should have told me, she said to Will. I was standing right then, loving you, while you were guarding a secret bigger than our entire relationship. Will reached for her. She stepped down. I do'n't know how to contend with that, she said still. You do'n't have to, Dylan said. I'll leave. Will spun toward him. No. Yes, Dylan claimed. This is my mess. Not yours. Not hers. Electra dithered. For the first time, she saw Dylan not as a rival, but as a man drowning under the weight of his history. But before any decision could be made, the doorbell chimed. Will opened it and sat. Standing there was a man none of them anticipated to see again. The man Dylan stressed most. Hello, Will, the foreigner said calmly. Mind if I come in? Dylan's blood ran cold. Electra rumored, who's that? Dylan's voice slightly worked. The man who knows everything. And just like that, the history came crashing through the frontal door. Secrets Will allowed were buried resurfaced. Electra realized the peril she'd intentionally stepped into. And Dylan faced the consequences he'd been running from for times. The man at the door stepped outside without staying for an assignation, his presence incontinently suffocating the room. He wore a calm smile, Too calm for someone who had just reignited a fire Dylan had spent times trying to extinguish. Relax, the man said smoothly. However, I wouldn't be then, if I wanted the police involved. Dylan's fists gripped at his sides. You promised you'd stay down. I promised I'd stay quiet, the man replied. Those are two veritably different effects. Electra looked between them, her instinct screaming that this was far bigger than she'd imagined. Someone want to explain why a foreigner is hanging my life right now? Will stepped forward protectively. You're not hanging anyone. You're leaving. The man chortled. Still playing idle, Will Spencer? Some effects no way change. That familiarity made Electra's stomach drop. You know him, she said to Will. Unfortunately, Will admitted. The man turned to her with polite interest. And you must be Electra. I've heard so much about you. Nothing good, I'm guessing, she snapped. Depends who you ask, he replied, eyes sliding back to Dylan. I'm then for him. Dylan's voice was tight. You got what you wanted times ago. Plutocrat. Silence. My life in remains. What more do you want? The man's smile faded. Insurance. Will strengthened. You said the substantiation was gone. I said I wouldn't use it, the man corrected. Again veritably different. Electra's heart pounded. Substantiation of what? Dylan closed his eyes. Evidence that I committed the crime. And that will help me vanish subsequently. Electra heaved, shock giving way to wrathfulness. You told me he was guarding you, not covering up a crime. Will seized Dylan's arm. Enough. But the man raised a hand. Let him speak. Truth has a way of coming out ultimately. Electra looked at Will, her voice breaking. You let me believe you were choosing Dylan out of fidelity, eschewal of kindness. But this? She shook her head. This is fear. Will swallowed hard. It started that way. But it didn't end there. Didn't it? She rumored. The man cleared his throat. I didn't come to destroy anyone's love story. I came to remind Dylan that fading again won't be so easy. Dylan stepped forward. If you hurt them. I won't, the man said coolly. As long as you cooperate. Electra scoffed. And what does cooperation look like? The man's aspect. Locked on Dylan. You come with me. Still. We settle this. No, Will said incontinently. Absolutely not. The man signed. Also I make a phone call. The room spun. Electra suddenly realized commodity intimidating Will hadn't just chosen Dylan over her, he'd chosen him over the law, over safety, over everything. She uncurled, resolve hardening. This ends now. Three men turned to her in surprise. I'm not letting this house come a crime scene, Electra continued. Dylan, you want to cover Will? Also stop letting him cover you. Dylan goggled at her. What are you saying? I'm saying you turn yourself in, she said forcefully. You tell the verity. Will's face drained of color. Electra, you don't understand. I understand impeccably, she shot back. I understand that secrets rot everything they touch. The man laughed vocally. Bold, noble, and veritably inconvenient. Dylan exhaled sluggishly. She's right. Will seized his shoulders. No, however, you lose everything, if you do this. Dylan met his eyes. I formally did. You're the only thing I've left and I won't let you go down with me. Electra felt gashes burn her eyes. This wasn't the man she abominated. This was a man trying, eventually, to do the right thing. Enchantresses sounded noiselessly in the distance. The man's smile dissolved. What did you do? Electra lifted her phone. I called the police. Will goggled at her in horror. Electra. I'm sorry, she rumored. But I love you too much to let you destroy yourself. Dylan closed his eyes in abdication as the enchantresses grew louder. The man bolted for the door, but it was too late. As flashing lights filled the windows, Dylan turned to Will one last time. Thank you for everything. Will's voice broke. I should have saved you. Dylan shook his head gently. You did. Just not the way you allowed. Police swamped the house. Handcuffs clicked. Electra watched as Dylan was let down, her heart heavy but strangely calm. When the door eventually closed and the house fell silent again, Will sank onto the settee, shattered. Electra stood in front of him, torn between love and loss. "This doesn't fix us," she said vocally. "But it stops the bleeding." Will looked up at her, eyes full of pain and gratefulness. "I do intern you." "Perhaps not," she replied. "But perhaps now we both have a chance to heal."